Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Richard Dolan Show, where every week we fight the good fight, at least on the weeks that I'm here doing this. I'm happy to be here with you this time. And by the way, happy early New Year's to everyone. Glad to be here with you. This is the time of year that a lot of channels will do a kind of retrospective on the year that's just passed, the good, the bad, and so on. But this hasn't been an ordinary year, of course. There is way too much to process, and people have been trying to do it all year long. I've been trying to do this all year long. I don't think I'd say anything new that I haven't been saying all year long. So it's obvious that the entire world is going through a truly revolutionary transformation, and it is happening fast. This great change, which the good people at Davos have been calling the Great Reset, is happening on multiple fronts. It's a truly comprehensive process that didn't start with the with the response to the COVID pandemic, but it was definitely given tremendous impetus by this pandemic and the response to the pandemic. All the directions we were going in up to 2020 have been switched into the highest gear now. And you can see, we're speeding along toward a destination, and the generalities of that destination are starting to become pretty well defined. Even if we can't or won't be able even to predict many specifics, probably until they're just right on top of us. So living without physical social interaction, there's one thing. That's a big, big thing that we've had to deal with. If you look at any old movie, old photographs, you read any old books even, you encounter something in these that unifies all of those and puts them in direct contrast with our own time. One thing you're going to notice, like in pictures or movies, are crowds of people all interacting with each other. And it's not that we don't have any of these types of interactions anymore ever, but it's quite obvious that the quality and especially the quantity of these types of interactions are very different and much less than they really were for any prior generation that we can think about. Those earlier generations of people, they often showed other things that you don't see as much here, like levels of confidence that one doesn't see quite as much anymore. And the ability to make direct eye contact, the ability to speak directly what's on your mind, to share ideas openly. And now even simple things like shaking hands, these are things that you see in prior generations that now are vanishing, and they're vanishing with terrifying speed. Now, there are many, many things we need to be concerned about moving into this new future. It's not just the, let's say, the overwhelming surveillance or the constant ideological bludgeoning that everyone is being subjected to, or the unleashing of social media mobs to control thought, or the ever increasingly narrower and narrower spaces into which genuine dissent is being corralled and herded. Yes, so all of that is frightening, or it should be frightening to those of us who still believe in genuine freedom. We're seeing today that, in fact, there are quite a few people who actually don't mind seeing these new restrictions on us, that freedom is not as important as safety to some of these people, whether that's real safety or perceived safety. Now, the justification for these measures has in part been enabled by the fact that we are often told that these measures are needed to combat a pernicious and dangerous pandemic. Now, let me make myself as clear as I can be on this part. No one needs to persuade me that COVID-19 is a genuine threat, and for some people, a severe health risk that does need to be dealt with effectively. I don't think we can just ignore it. Let me just add a personal note to all of this. This is still difficult for me to talk about, so forgive me, but I just lost my mother 1 week ago to this day due to complications from COVID-19. She was 79 years old, which of course put her at a very high risk. She ended up passing away from double pneumonia, not the actual COVID that she caught, but she was being cared for. The COVID caught the pneumonia while she was being cared for. So it's obvious that COVID was the catalyst that brought my mother down in her final illness. I mean, it happens like that sometimes. My family is devastated by the loss. I can tell you that I am devastated by it. Like many people her age, she was still filled with so much energy and vitality right up to her last illness. She would have been good for many, many more wonderful years ahead of her. There's no doubt in anyone's mind who knew her. Let me say that even my mother recognized the ominous changes to our society that have been coming as a result of the reaction to this pandemic. She could see it, and it was something that she and I talked about quite a bit over this year. I'm going to miss talking to her about that and everything else. But for right now, I don't want to focus on the overtly heavy-handed measures. Oh, let me just say this as well. Tracy and I both want to thank all of you so very much. Those of you who sent us sympathy, condolences, and just words of support in this very difficult time for me and for her. Tracy loved my mother so very much, and it's been a difficult time, and we're both very grateful for the support of every one of you who have reached out to us, so thank you. But let me get back to this topic here, if I may. And by the way, the work is good for me, so let me do this. So where I was is, for right now, I don't want to focus on the like obvious heavy-handed measures that have been taken around the world to control the populations within their borders. All of this is justified as a way to attack COVID, but all measures that have severely restricted freedoms of all kind to people everywhere. I think it is a sure bet that many of those freedoms and privacies won't ever be coming back. I'll repeat that. I don't think that many of the freedoms and privacies we enjoyed pre-2020 are ever going to come back. I think that they are gone for all intents and purposes in this society that we now live in. They may come back in a future world. I don't see it coming back for a long time. Methods of social control are going to increase ever more effectively and efficiently. Think of China as the model, and you're going to have a very good picture of what to expect elsewhere. That is a system of totalitarian genius, better than any system that has ever been conceived by any dictator who's ever lived before. Beyond Hitler, beyond Stalin, beyond Mao, beyond any of those guys. What's coming into place now is beyond that in terms of population control. Complete with the nefarious and Orwellian social credit system of so-called trustworthiness as defined by the Chinese state, that is the Chinese Communist Party. They've done an absolutely, I have to say this, brilliant job of terrifying their population into compliance on pretty much anything you can imagine. This is something that Western leaders and financial elites look upon as a model to be emulated, not avoided. And add to this a certain implementation of extremely intelligent, deep learning algorithms to guide this process. And what we are currently seeing will be vastly worse in just a couple of years. I'll give you an example of what I mean. We all know how Google's DeepMind created a learning program in the very complex game of Go, invented in China many, many centuries ago. Google's DeepMind, they just created this, I think 4 years ago. All they did was they gave the program the rules of the game and allowed it to practice against itself for a very short time before unleashing it against some of the world's top Go players, where it, in fact, one in particular, I think we all read about, he was one of the best in the world, is one of the best in the world, and this algorithm just totally crushed him. Now, some people may not be aware that the same thing happened in the realm of chess just 3 years ago. So DeepMind created a chess learning program called AlphaZero. So this AlphaZero, just like the Go equivalent, is not a typical chess engine, which relies on extensive programming of like all the top chess games, relies on brute force to calculate something like 60 million moves a second. That's not what AlphaZero does. That's what other chess engines do. For the record, the world's top chess engine or chess program is called Stockfish. And Stockfish is truly astounding. It back in 2017, when this match happened with AlphaZero, Stockfish was rated at something like 3,300 or 3,400, which is higher than any human player who has ever lived. So no chess player, not Bobby Fischer, not Garry Kasparov, not Magnus Carlsen today has ever even broken 2,900. So Stockfish is amazing. But here is DeepMind's AlphaZero, all right? Was given no book of chess games, nothing but the rules to play by. That was it. So AlphaZero, like I was saying, it can't even do anywhere near the numbers of calculations per second that Stockfish can do. Stockfish does 60 million per second. AlphaZero it's in the thousands, not the millions. It's orders of magnitude less. But AlphaZero learns differently. Well, it actually learns. So after a mere 4 hours of learning chess, starting at zero knowledge, AlphaZero starting at zero knowledge and playing only against itself, 4 hours, it then was set upon against Stockfish for a series of games, and the result was a lopsided drubbing of Stockfish by AlphaZero. 4 hours. And what you notice in those games, by the way, is how creative AlphaZero is, how often it makes moves that human players would not think to make, that aren't part of any previous chess book of strategy. It makes original, daring, and ultra-precise moves that totally and completely outclassed the amazing Stockfish engine. So now, more recently, the same type of DeepMind learning program figured out a way to fold proteins. All right. That was, and that is very big news. Proteins are ultra complex. They fold into unique shapes that are dependent on the order that each proteins, they've got their own constituent elements that are aligned in a different order. All right. And I think if I read this correctly, it's 57. I think that's the 57. And they can go in all these different orders. So as you can imagine, it's like a virtual infinity of combinations here. And so for over 50 years, no one has been able to predict the folding pattern of these proteins based on the order of the elements, just because it's vastly too complex for us. So DeepMind was given the task of doing this and solved it like almost immediately or extremely quickly. Scientists were shocked, they were pleased, but they were kind of in a state of shock about this. This is like Nobel caliber stuff here, and it just did it like that. So these things are amazing for sure, but think about this, especially in relation to what I'm talking about here, and in relation to, I was mentioning chess and Go just a moment ago. So those are games of strategy and they're games of tactics, right? So do you really doubt that different versions of DeepMind learning algorithms are being set to the tasks of developing, say, new ideas for military engagements? I mean, after all, war gaming is a highly developed practice. It's all about strategy and tactics. So yes, I think we can assume that deeply classified efforts are underway in many countries to try to capitalize on the possibility that new and revolutionary techniques can be discovered and exploited. And they're hoping that something like DeepMind will have an original approach to some of these problems. Probably does. Or think about forms of social control. After all, you can see those examples as examples of strategy and tactics, right? I mean, do you think that people and groups can't war game, in other words, their own scenarios of population control and of social control with the help of deep learning algorithms? And if you doubt this, you should probably think again. Who can say when any such program is fully going to be rolled out, even in secret, especially in secret? For all we know, it's already being rolled out, and some of the despotic measures that we have seen this past year, well, maybe they've already been guided by programs like this. I mean, I wonder about this. I tend to doubt this only because in my mind, I would expect measures even more breathtakingly dramatic and frightening than what we've seen. But who knows? It's entirely possible that the strategies now being undertaken to create a global social, cultural, economic, political revolution, maybe they are actually being rolled out according to a perfected strategy from some algorithm. I mean, I can't say that I know the answer. I don't know if any of us does, but I would have to say it's a possibility. But it doesn't even matter because, this scenario is certainly coming, and it probably won't take very long. We are looking at the prospect of humanity being converted into one big giant anthill. It's one in which there really won't be any true wiggle room for people who yearn to be free. So that's a problem. Which brings me to my main theme for this video. What will be the future of what we have long considered to be normal and standard forms of human social interaction? It's a hard question to ask because we're really staring at some potentially radically different outcomes for the coming year and for beyond the coming year. And yet we all want to get back. I mean, everyone wants to get back to some form of pre-2020 sense of human social interaction. Like, who doesn't want that? Well, probably a couple of people don't want that, but most of us want that. In order to do that, we're all told now, there will need to be, we all know what's coming here. We're being told there's going to need to be a globally implemented vaccination system in place. They're already being rolled out. Everyone knows it's happening. Whatever your personal feelings on this, and look, people have different opinions on this. I think it's become very clear by now that whatever you think about this, that we are not going to be allowed to have any return to some sense of what we think of as normalcy without that. That has been made crystal clear to all of us. And I am not going to discuss the medical implications of these vaccines because, you know what, I'd rather keep my YouTube channel for now. And whatever you think about this, you must realize, of course, that dissenting opinions on this subject are absolutely not permitted. And this is not a hill that I'm going to choose to die on. At least not this time. I got other hills to worry about. I got too many other hills to deal with. So no, I want to run something else by you. We've been hearing from another so-called authoritative voices that even with a vaccine, that we are not likely to return to normal social life for some time. So we're told social distancing and masks will still be necessary. Although no one, if you really listen carefully, no one's really specifying to what extent this will be the case or anything to do with specifics whatsoever. But the entire scenario is being left open-ended for what appears to be an indefinite and potentially very prolonged experience. Earlier today, I'm not quoting any of these for you. Who really cares? I mean, you could go like USA Today or CNN or any like mainstream publication, and they all say the same thing here. They all talk about this is going to be a long haul. I mean, already after nearly a year of this, countless people are living in a form of prison. Right? Not genuine prison, of course, but I mean, relatively speaking, a situation in which so many people are not having even a small fraction of the social experiences that they used to have. This pandemic has isolated us physically, putting us in communication with others digitally, virtually. Now, I mean, look, most of us have families scattered in different parts of the country or different parts of the world, and we all realize how valuable this can be to us. It's valuable to me. I like talking, especially in these days, with family members who live far away from me. But when virtual communication becomes the dominant way of interacting, or the dominant way of getting information, for that matter, we're putting ourselves into a very dangerous situation, and literally something that is not natural to our species. I mean, we are biological organisms. We are designed to interact with people directly, face to face, eyeball to eyeball. And that is a quality very much in retreat these days. So I think it's easy to predict that even after masks no longer are said to be mandatory in most of the world, you can bet that many people are going to continue to wear them. I think many people undoubtedly are going to keep social distancing, probably for a long time, even after they're told it's no longer necessary. We don't really know how deeply this last year has affected many of us at a deep psychological level. I mean, to the extent of trauma, I think is really what we're dealing with here. All right. Maybe one day we're going to get to a point where we can truly be done with social distancing. But the problem is going to be that an entire new system is going to be in place by then. And that is because the real lockdown in place is the lockdown of the mind. We can argue, we can debate, we can discuss over whether or not this is something that has happened by design or by default. That is, did a small group of people at Davos or at the last Bilderberg meeting plan for this rollout? Or are the policies that are in place simply a natural extension of the technocratic totalitarian system that every single day extends its tendrils into every aspect of our once free society or freer society? You know, design or default? My personal guess is that it's a bit of both. And this sort of thing's been on my mind for a little while. I wrote about it in my most recent book, The Alien Agendas, a speculative analysis. In that book, I introduced an idea about the 3 stages of humanity, and I believe we are right now rapidly moving into stage 4. The first 3 were hunting and gathering, which lasted for most of our existence. Then the agricultural revolution, which gave us human civilization as we understand it. And then stage 3 being, the scientific and industrial revolutions, which is the world we all grew up in. And each of these 3 stages is very distinct from the others, creating entirely different technologies, different social structures, different ideas, different cultural norms. They're all distinct. And yes, of course, there's variations within them, but fundamentally, they are unified by very basic things. Stage 1, 2, 3, and we're moving into 4, something entirely different. We can't see the whole picture, but we can already make a lot out of it. It is not simply a matter of change by degree, but a change of kind, something fundamental. It's a world of total control over our digital expression, over our personal interests, our conversations, and even our physical bodies through monitoring and controlling our physical movement and the status of our health, combined with a widespread loss of economic and financial freedom for most people. All right, we're looking at a society of massively disenfranchised folks with little to no hope of a better world in this physical realm that we live in here. What's going to be left to people is obvious. It'll be a world of, it is and will be more so, a world of virtual distractions. Maybe I often wonder, like a vision similar to the Spielberg movie Ready Player One. Not really a great movie, in my opinion, but a very interesting look at our future. It's actually worth looking at for that reason, for the scenario that's laid out there. In other words, a future world so devoid of genuine hope that people basically opt out and they just live their lives virtually, become a celebrity millionaire in your online virtual fantasy world, whatever. And this happens because we have isolated ourselves. We aren't exposing ourselves to people who are different, who think differently than ourselves, who can genuinely challenge us. Because look, we have the ability now to live in our own little bubble world, our own personal echo chambers, in which it's very easily possible now for every one of us to be exposed only to the ideas that we already agree with. And that's another surefire way to make us all very psychologically brittle. There's a lot more going on here. All genuine understanding of our history is being erased from us. And it's just getting worse with each new year and each new generation that is growing into this world. A reasonable understanding of our past is just gone. And without understanding our past, even in generalities, we are incredibly vulnerable to manipulation, into accepting measures of social organization and control that a historically or politically astute public would not accept. Hell, we're accepting measures of control that would not have been imaginable just a couple of years ago, to say nothing of a decade ago or a generation or two ago. And that's because, like, to each of us in our daily lives, the changes may seem incremental because, well, it just seems like a little bit every day or a little bit every week. But if you take a few steps back, it's very easy to see to appreciate just how swift and dramatic all these changes have been. Back to our future social interactions. It's pretty clear that nearly everyone wants to get back to a world in which we can go to the store or the restaurant or a party or a family gathering, including weddings and funerals, without the fear of them being canceled or at best under heavy social distancing. We had to forego a proper funeral for my mother, which was a hard blow to us, and we're hoping we can do a family event sometime next summer. But of course, no one knows what's going to happen here. We have not the slightest clue. The economic fallout is another thing that experts might be able to predict, but still none of us can really imagine until it hits fully. It's already hit millions of people around the world with their loss of livelihood. And it's been widely estimated that at least 50% of all small businesses, at least in the US, are not going to be coming back after all of the dust has settled. And keep in mind that small businesses have always been the lifeblood of the American and global economy. That had already been changing over the years as major corporate entities have continually gobbled up market share for all kinds of production and services. A development, by the way, fully desired and promoted by the global elite people who meet and plan our world every year at their economic forums and their gatherings. But it's all been sped up in this last year quite dramatically. All right. So what that world is going to be like for those unfortunate people and for more and more of us will be dependency upon those large corporations and indeed our governments for our very survival. Universal basic income. I mean, that was until this year, that was only something that just a very few people talked about on the fringes, until Andrew Yang really made it something of a national conversation here in the US. But now it's already being discussed as a necessary given in the new world that we're creating. And it's not hard to see why. The jobs are going away. Those smart algorithms I talked about earlier, they're going to be playing a big part of that, as well as the massive centralization of the global economy, which I think is every bit as big a reason, if not bigger. So when enough people become wards of the state, totally dependent upon it for their income, you got to ask yourself, how independent do you think they're likely to be, especially if the time comes when a social credit system is even more entrenched around the world than it already is. I mean, we're already developing a very informal and still very powerful social credit type of system here in the West. You wait until it's formalized and you think that can't happen. Well, I would say think again. It's already starting to happen. And despite the supposed miracle of the vaccines, which are supposed to keep us safe, no one's predicting anything like a so-called return to normal until well into next year. I mean, Bill Gates, I think, gave the earliest prediction, early spring of 2021. I recall reading not long ago when he said things might start to get normal. I'm like, really? That's what you think? I don't think he really thinks that, but that's what he did say. Anthony Fauci said probably not until the end of 2021 at the earliest. And then there are no shortage of statements out there that put the road toward getting back to normal several years out beyond that. Some people are telling us that masks are going to be the new normal way of life with no expiration date set on any of that. All right. So what this means is a total psychological assault on the very things that have helped to define our humanity. Everyone understands, even the creators and defenders of these policies, they all understand that this is taking a severe toll on the mental health of all of us. I don't think any of us could be accepted from this. We're not designed to live like this. And the experience is changing us. And it's certainly very likely to have a dramatic effect on the new generations. You ask yourself, what about all these kids who've been born or are being raised in this environment right now with social distancing and masks? Do we even know what kind of long-term effect all of this is having on them psychologically? Can we even begin to estimate the potential for severe damage being done to them? Because I honestly don't think we can. But we've got to recognize that the damage is, potentially is something that could be substantial as the years pass. And I sincerely doubt that we're really going to understand all the implications of this for a long, long time to come. Our species, the human species, us, we are being re-engineered into a social construct that is designed not for our best personal outcomes. It is not. And not really even, I would argue, not even to cope with this pandemic, although that's clearly the pretext. I don't really think so. I think we're being engineered to accommodate the new technological, economic, and political reality that is being foisted upon us at this time. We are being designed to accommodate the new system that I believe is the fourth stage of humanity. If you're new to what I do for a living, by the way, I write books about UFOs. And for many years, that was something considered, totally fringe, something that serious thinkers were said not to bother with. Of course, I found a whole bunch of them under the surface who were very deeply interested, even in the early years. But what we're now seeing is that this perception has become obviously outdated, and that there is a new, fairly widespread recognition that UFOs or UAP are, in fact, a real thing. How about that? And are quite serious, quite fascinating, and unexplained, and definitely something worth our reflection and our understanding. And my own thoughts on this subject, I've sometimes speculated on who I think the beings are behind the phenomenon. Again, that's the subject of my last book. Spoiler alert, I don't think they come from here, however you want to define here. I think they are not from our civilization. I've come to the opinion that the kind of development that we're experiencing in this latest crisis is moving us very much closer to the kind of social organization that I believe these other beings are most likely to have. That is, I don't think that their societies are based on concepts of freedom and individualism. I do think that they are probably guided by their own versions of deep mind, their own version of a highly advanced artificial intelligence that maps out their society and their lives for them. It's a real possibility for us to consider that we are going through a transformation, perhaps comparable to what other species have already gone through. Something that, while making the individual members of those societies less autonomous in many ways, still gives exceptional power to society as a whole, and especially to those who manage it. The combination of powerful AI combined with a massive, comprehensive surveillance capability over every single aspect of our lives, combined with the reduction of genuine freedom of deciding your economic future or your ability to dissent from so-called authoritative statements. Well, you can see as easily as I can what this is all going to look like. What is happening is that with everything taken away from us all at once, we're going to be so desperate to reach any semblance of the old ways that if or when we do get back any type of what we think of as social normality, right, that creeps its way back into our lives, we're going to clutch at that as if it's the very manna from heaven, which, let's face it, normal social interactions in which you don't have to wear a mask and you can shake someone's hand or hug your grandmother. I mean, these are things we desperately want and need. We need them. But if we do get them back, and I imagine that we will at some point get at least some of those same things back, I believe we will, that they're going to come back within a completely different cultural, economic, and political setting. 500 years ago, Niccolo Machiavelli wrote his political classic called The Prince. And in that book, if you haven't read it, it's not a long book. It's actually a really good book. Or you can just look it up online and read about it. But in that book, Machiavelli very intelligently I mean, he was really the first of what we would consider like a genuine political realist, and in many ways, the founder of modern political science, you could say. What he recommended for rulers, very cold-blooded, but he said, look, if you're going to establish your power and authority, you'd better slam down on the people right away, very hard at first, all at once. Like, you've got to shock. Basically, he didn't say shock and awe, but that was essentially his idea. He said, then, if you want, you can slowly ease up bit by bit, if you want to do that, and then the people will more likely be grateful. He said, if you don't do that, and instead, if you start off soft and you start acting harsher and harsher measures bit by bit, especially if you start out with a kind of a liberal policy in a way, then you risk getting folks very angry and in a state of rebellion. So this is Machiavelli. He says you slam down hard, really hard, and then slowly ease up. Never all the way, though. You never ease up all the way to the before times. So that, of course, is exactly what we are seeing and what we are experiencing right now. We are experiencing a series of draconian measures that are being enacted across the board, some of which might be relaxed at some point, some which we may not have even seen yet. So let's just put that out there. All right. But some which might be relaxed. But the idea is very possible that most of us are going to feel so beaten down in every way that we're going to be very glad to take those little bones when they throw them at us. But even if we do get to a point where social interactions become a little more relaxed again, let's just say, I personally do not see them ever getting back to the way that things once were. I just don't see that happening. I think the confidence, the daring, the willingness of earlier generations to accept danger, to accept risk, I don't see that coming back. Not in the Western world, if ever, then not for a long time. I think the reason is because we're just being, again, corralled into a certain kind of pen. And we are being told to get used to it because this is the new normal. It's unhealthy, we're told, to fight against this new reality and to pine for the old ways. See, the problem is that the old ways were ways designed to meet with our biological needs. Keep in mind that we are nature. We're not separate from nature. We are animals. We're mammals. It's what we are. Or rather, what we've been for 300,000 years as this species, and then for millions of years, if you want to include our hominid ancestors, and hell, let's throw billions of years out there if you want to include the life forms that gave rise to hominids. We often forget that we are nature. We like to think that we can just keep transforming ourselves and transforming our world into all these infinite variations without any repercussions, that we can improve on our natural selves and our natural state of being. Look, I'm not suggesting that we all return to the total state of nature and become hunters and gatherers. We crossed that bridge a long time ago, but we always kept close those things that mattered most to us as human beings. And we are in danger of losing some of those key elements. I don't think we should be kidding ourselves here. And I don't even know if we can stop this train entirely from getting to the station, but I do think that you, as an individual, can do a lot to maintain yourself as a free person of integrity. These days, it's very tempting for us to slip into virtual realities and all the fantasies that are being foisted upon us by an intelligence and entertainment state that has realized one of the key ways to control us is through fantasy of all kinds. And it's going to be very important for those of us who care to do everything that we can to preserve the heritage and love of genuine freedom that all of us were raised on, but which more and more of us seem to be believing in less and less. We can't afford to surrender what remains of our humanity in favor of some new normal that seems, at least to me, to be fundamentally anti-human. The ultimate end of all of this are going to be methods in place to ensure mental and ideological conformity with what surely appears to be an increasingly intolerable situation. The frogs are slowly boiling. We have got to find a way. We have got to find a way to remain free to the best of our ability. Not violently, but peacefully. Violence will definitely backfire on anyone who uses it anyway. It's not going to accomplish anything today. We've got to find new ways of expressing ideas freely. And we definitely have got to find all the courage we can to face the coming times. None of this is going to be easy. But I remind myself that others before us have faced down grave and awful threats and dangers. They had it in them, and so do we. Well, that's all I've got for this time. If you like what you see here, please help me and smash that like button. If you are not a subscriber to this channel, but like the content, please consider subscribing and hitting the notifications button so that you don't miss new programs. I don't publish new material on YouTube like clockwork the way that I used to. I may get back to that, but until I do, notifications will help you. By the way, I do foresee the possibility of increasing, yes, my YouTube video production at some point. But for now, notifications are your best bet to catch me live. Also, check out my latest book, The Alien Agendas. You can check that. I've got the link below. Just go to the website, Rich Dolan Members. The front page will tell you all about the book. If you're interested, I enjoyed that book, and I was very glad to have written it. It's a different kind of a book for me. Anyway, you can check that out if you're interested. Also, we've got a slew of audio books that are coming out. We're hoping for January. It takes a little longer for Amazon's audiobook system to get all these things rolled out. We've got a number of the books submitted. They sound really good. And we're doing audiobooks of all of my major books. So they will be available soon. We had this idea that we could get them out for Christmas, and that just was not possible, it turns out. I want to add that Tracy and I always appreciate all of the support we have received, both from members of our website, richarddolanmembers.com, and here in this channel. We realize that there's always other things you can do with your time and other places you can